with that, I'm going to introduce Dr. Haley Nelson, who I have known since we were in high school together. And that's also part of reconnecting. I think it's just wonderful during this time that people come out of the woodwork and you realize, oh, yeah, we have a lot in common and we can bring something out in each other and help each other's lives. So Haley and I used to do theater together in high school. And we have both branched away from that world, but use our creativity in our current professions. And I'm just going to turn things over to you, Haley.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to do this. And just like you said, I'm so glad that we were able to reconnect. And it was because, as you said, our lives and career choices and everything have, they've diverged since, we were in theater together in high school. But it was great to be able to, because we both have businesses, reach out to each other and say, hey, how can we support each other? And it's been way too long since we've seen each other. And when we actually physically see each other face to face, you better believe you're getting a big hug. So of course, when it's safe. But let me share my screen. And again, hopefully this will not cause any kind of technical glitches. Let me know if you can see that.
Yeah, I can see it.
You can see it. Perfect. Okay. And of course, now I have to move all this stuff around so I can see my screen. Okay. So I am Dr. Haley Nelson. I am an associate professor of psychology at Delaware County Community College. And I also started Be Well Inside and Out with me, Dr. Haley Nelson. And today I'm going to be talking about stress and the brain. I'm a neuroscientist by training. So I'm going to talk all about the physiological effects of what stress is, how it works, and how it's manifested in the brain. And then different ways that we can mitigate some of those effects. I'm going to be looking at really all the different types of options. Obviously, I can't talk about everything, but some of the more popular or more common ways to mitigate some of the effects of stress. But of course, that list is not all inclusive. So here we go. A little bit about me. This is me with my two boys, Charlie and Henry, and they are currently in the basement playing video games. So fingers crossed they stay quiet for us. I did bring my headset in case they start running up here. And Charlie is 7 going into, or he is in 1st grade now, and Henry turned 3 in June. And then we also, because why not add a little bit extra stress into our lives, we just got a new puppy. That's Evie, pictured down there. And I live in the Philadelphia area with my husband and 2 kids and dog. And as I mentioned, my background is in neuroscience. I have a PhD from Johns Hopkins University in psychological and brain sciences, where I studied really the effects of dopamine on motivated behaviors. But before I started at Johns Hopkins, I was a research fellow with the National Institutes of Health, both in the National Institute of Mental Health, where I was looking at depression in women, and then also with the National Institute on Drug Abuse. So after those experiences, I became faculty at the University of Pennsylvania, which is what brought me up here to Philadelphia area. And I was teaching several courses about, psychopharmacology and drugs and just intro to neuroscience and other psychology courses. And then I recently just earned a tenure at Delaware County Community College. And I'm in the psych department there. I teach intro psych, an addictions course, as well as a biopsych course. And when we talk about stress, being around college age students all the time, and then obviously my own life, it's definitely something that it resonates with me. And I love being able to share some tips and tricks. So I'm glad that I was able to do that with you today. I love the brain. I get so excited. So if I ever start talking really fast, it's because I get really excited. So you can always just raise your hand and tell me to slow down or repeat anything. I also founded Be Well Inside and Out with Dr. Haley. I have a brand partner with Arbonne International, and I'm super excited that I have that partnership with them, where I'm really able to reach out and touch and help people in a really holistic way for just overall beauty, health, and wellness, inside and out. So whether it's talking about mindset or nutrition goals or physical changes, anything like that, skincare needs, I love to be able to work with people and help make recommendations and referrals and things like that. So without further ado, our talk today, the outline, I'm going to very briefly go over the introduction of the nervous system, and then specifically talk about the neurobiology of the stress response. And then I will talk about some holistic options for management of anxiety as well as chronic stress. So when we're talking about the nervous system, it really has three basic functions. It allows us to interact with the outside world. So first we have to be able to receive information from the world, and we do this through our senses, so vision, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. And then what do we do with that information, right? We have to be able to process it, and that's where the brain, right, or cognition really kicks in, to be able to pay attention to it, to perceive it, to remember it, to learn from it, to grow, right? And then we need to respond to it. So let's say there's a bee flying around, right? I see it. If it lands on me, I can feel it. Hopefully, we're not tasting it, but we can hear it as well. So that's the first step, is being able to receive that information. And then we have to process it. Now, for me, if I see a bee, I'm going to get nervous and anxious and probably run away from it. That would be my process in response to it. But if I'm a beekeeper, if I'm studying flight patterns of bees or whatever, I'm going to probably think about it differently. I might want to try to look at the wings under a microscope, or I'm going to, gather them to make honey, or whatever it is, right? So that's where the individualization comes in. We all receive the same information, but then how we process it can change from person to person and also time to time. And then of course our response. And so there is some fluidity here that, let's say, you have some kind of a problem, and we're going to be talking about this. We can break the cycle of, if we're constantly responding to a stimulus in a negative, maladaptive way, we can change, we can look at our behaviors, we can also look at how we're processing that information to be able to then let it not really affect us as much. All right, so our nervous system, no, I'm not gonna quiz you on any of this stuff, but just keep in mind that when you hear the word nervous system, it's really nervous systems. There's multiple avenues, and we're gonna talk both about the central nervous system as well as the peripheral nervous system in today's talk. But then even know that the peripheral nervous system, again, is broken down into different systems. And again, we're gonna focus on both the sympathetic as well as parasympathetic nervous system, which is part of our peripheral nervous system. Peripheral meaning every neuron and nerve outside of our head and spinal cord, whereas the central nervous system is our brain and spinal cord. And what makes up our nervous system, the basic units or the basic cells within the nervous system, are known as neurons. And they're really like any other cell in our body, right? They've got the cell nucleus and the mitochondria and ribosomes and all that stuff that you may or may not remember from high school biology class. But they are specialized in that they do exactly what the nervous system is set up to do, to receive, to process, and to have some kind of a response, right? So it receives information from other neurons and other cells. It integrates this information. And then if the information that it gathered is enough, or if it's strong enough, then it can in turn transmit information to nearby cells and glands and muscles and things like that. So, and then when you look at them all together, they can create these neural networks and that have meaningful connections with other cells and organs and things like that. Now, this is just looking at one neuron here, right? Keep in mind there are 100 billion neurons in the average adult human brain. All right, so 100 billion, a lot, okay? I'm definitely simplifying this, or we're just gonna be looking at communication between one or two neurons. So there's 100 billion, and each one of those 100 billion neurons has connections with about 10,000 other cells. So I'm not a mathematician. I don't know what 100 billion to the 10,000th is, but it's a lot. It's basically infinite, right? Which means there's an infinite number of possibilities for how we're going to process and receive and interpret and then also transmit information. And that's how identical twins can have completely different behavioral responses to the exact same stimulus, right? We learn, we change, we have different experiences, and all of that is going to create these different neural networks that's going to then now, when you're looking at one of those 10,000 connections in any one of those 100 billion neurons, right, to very in very simple terms. So here's one neuron. It's known as the presynaptic neuron. I don't know if you can see my marker or not, but then it's communicating with this postsynaptic neuron, otherwise labeled as neuron B. And then if you zoom in, you can see that this is one of those connections. That the first neuron is sending this action potential, which is basically if there's enough information that was received, it's going to generate this response. And the response is this action potential coming down to the end of this first neuron, and it's going to trigger a release of chemicals into the space between the first neuron and the second neuron. And then those chemicals are received by receptors that are located postsynaptically, meaning on that secondary neuron. And if you think about the chemical and the receptor, think of it as like a lock and a key, right? So if I, look at my keychain, I have several different several different keys, but only one of those keys is going to fit into my front door, right? So you can picture those chemicals as being the key, and it's selective for the specific receptor, that specific, the receptor or the specific lock for that particular chemical. And it's the same kind of analogy that we're talking about here when we're looking at our nervous system and how they communicate from one neuron to the other. And there are over 100 different types of neurotransmitters that have currently been identified, and we're still learning so much more. And they can range from proteins to gases, there's so many different varieties of chemical signals that can allow our cells to be able to communicate with one another. But these are just some of the more common ones that you'll learn about in a psychology course or something like that. And the one that I want to call your attention to, which is going to be really important for today's lecture, is serotonin. And you've probably heard about serotonin before, because if you have too little or too much of it, it can really cause a lot of effect on our behavior, on our mood, on our sleep patterns, our arousal state, our hunger levels, things like that. And we know that if we have too little of it, it can be linked to depression and anxiety. And therefore, a lot of times, if you're thinking of it from a Western medicine philosophy, you give medications, right? Talk to your primary care doctor, they're going to say, hey, or take this SSRI, for example, which stands for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And the end result is it's going to increase the amount of serotonin that's available here within that space between the two cells. And we'll talk about that in a little bit when I talk about different ways in order to mitigate some of the effects of stress. Okay, so serotonin really is that big one for today's talk that we should remember. But again, there are a lot of different neurotransmitters can affect your mood and behavior, like dopamine, acetylcholine, norepinephrine, all of those. If they're out of balance, it can certainly affect the way that we think, the way that we move, the way that we act, the way that we sleep, all of that. So it's really important to figure out ways in which to make sure that the levels are balanced, right? And we can do that a number of different ways. And I work with clients all the time looking at their nutrition and things like that, of how we can naturally boost some of these neurotransmitters. Now, another thing that can affect our mood and stress levels, and we're going to talk about this as well, is our endocrine system. So endocrine is just a fancy way to talk about hormones, right? So we have all of these different endocrine glands located throughout our body, in the brain, all the way throughout. And what they do is they allow hormones to be released into our central blood circulation. Of course, my dog's going to start barking as I'm talking with you guys, sorry. But what happens is these hormones are actually controlled by our brain. So hold on, let me let her outside 1 second. I'm so sorry. If I didn't let her out, she would just be sitting there looking at me barking and then probably have an accident in the house. So, but these hormones are able to circulate throughout our blood, but it's controlled by our brain. So particularly our pituitary gland, you can think of it as like your master gland. It's going to send signals to these various endocrine glands and say, hey, we need more testosterone, or we need more estrogen, or we need less, or we need more thyroid hormone, things like that, to really control and allow our bodies to work at an optimal level. And so this really, looking at the endocrine system, it's a beautiful way to look at the interplay, especially when we're talking about stress, between the nervous systems and the endocrine systems. So now we're going to start talking about stress. What is stress, right? It's actually a very active term. So it's a process. It's a lot of times people think of stress as like it's a noun, but I like to think of it more as a verb, that it's something that is constantly changing because it's a process. And what stress is, it's a way of appraising or thinking about an event. And then we really have two choices. We can look at it as something that's a threat, or we can look at it as a challenge, and then our response to it. So if we look at a stressor, which would be that noun, right, that thing, that object or that situation, that if we look at it and view it as a threat, that's when it's going to start having strong negative reactions to that threat, right? And it's something that's been conserved through evolution because it keeps us safe, right? The stressors that are threatening, we want to get out of there, right? Or we want to hide, and whatever it is that we need to do to protect our bodies and our minds, that our bodies were set up in such a way to be able to respond to those threats, right? Those stressors that we perceive as threats in a certain way. But it can cause problems if we have really extreme stress or prolonged stress, especially if we're looking at them as a threat, right? That's where we can start having some really negative consequences, both mentally as well as physically. So this is one of the charts that Diamando sent out to you all earlier. And if you didn't have a chance to look at it, it's okay. You can look at my screen, or you can pull it up now. There were researchers back in 1967, and this was the actually original chart, which has been updated more recently, but I think there should be a whole line on there just for 2020. That basically what it's doing is looking at all these potential things that could be happening in your life, and then it gives it an impact on your life, right? So some of these stressors, and these are all stressors, a lot of times people think of stressors as only being negative things, but getting married, that's a really beautiful, joyous thing. However, it can cause a lot of stress in somebody's life. It has a lot of impact on them. And so these researchers went through and basically quantified how much of an impact some of these stressors can have on your life. And then what they did, and this was a relatively valid and reliable study that they did that, still is used to this day. Again, it started in 1967, was their first publication of it. And it's still used to this day. The chart that I gave you was pulled from a live website now, the American Stress Institute, I believe it was. And what I usually try to ask people to do is count up the number of these things that they've had within the past 12 months. So within the past year, or if you know that it's happening next week or something like that. So kind of go through and put a little check mark next to the things that you've encountered this year and start adding it up. And a lot of times what people, if you know somebody who has a death of a spouse or is going through a divorce, or, a death of a close family member, things like that, that none of us would argue that that's not insignificant, right? That's a big thing that happened in somebody's life. I know that when I see people who, it just seems like they just keep getting the bottom end of the stick or whatever it's called, right? When life just keeps throwing negative things onto them. And how are you able to cope? How are you able to deal with this? And then I see other people and I'm like, you just got a parking ticket. Why are you freaking out? Right? It's not that big of a deal. But what you don't know is what's actually happening behind the scenes, right? So minor violations of the law, let's say a parking ticket, right? It's only 11 impact scores, but if you got 30 of them over the past year, right? 30 times 11, that's going to start adding up, and it's really going to start having a toll on you, and so all of these things kind of go through. Again, the list that I gave you is definitely updated, and add it up and kind of see where you would range. So the likelihood of experiencing an illness in the near future, this is, looking at 80% likely if you're at 300 or more. Actually, I think, Diamando, I said to you, I barely know anybody who's under 300. I meant 150. So most people I meet are 150 or above. If you're less than 150, tell me your secret sauce because I want to live your life. But most people, so if you have over 150, don't worry, you're not alone. But it does mean that you really should start thinking about what's happening in your life and how we can make some positive changes to kind of combat some of the negative impact. We really can't control a lot of stressors that happen in our life, but we can have a little bit of control over how we respond and how we react to those stressors. All right, so keep that in your back pocket, but don't freak out about it, right? If you have a higher number, it just means, okay, let me really think about different ways that I can mitigate some of those stressors in my life. Now, if you start having a lot of those stressors, what can happen is it's going to activate two different systems within your body. You've probably heard of the term fight or flight, right? And that's actually activating the sympathetic nervous system. And that's going to prepare your body for a really brief emergency response. That's going to be, you know, if you're in the store and then all of a sudden somebody comes in with a gun, right? You're going to go into this fight, flight, or freeze actually way that your body's going to protect you. Are you going to charge at that person holding the gun, or are you going to run away from them? Are you going to freeze and panic and just kind of shut down? What are you going to do? And the reason why you do that is to protect yourself, right? And it's meant to be very quick emergency situations. You can also activate what's known as the HPA axis, which stands for the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And there's three different parts, and this is a beautiful interplay between the brain and the endocrine system, where these stressors, especially for prolonged experiences of stress, the HPA axis kicks in. And that's where you're going to have the cortisol, which is the stress hormone. It's coined as the stress hormone. It's going to be released and help protect you that way. So when you have those emergency situations, the autonomic nervous system is going to be activated. And just keep in mind with the autonomic nervous system, there's two systems within it. So you have the sympathetic nervous system, that's going to put you in action. So if you see a child running towards a body of water and you know they can't swim, you're going to charge toward them, you're going to grab them, right? And if you had a mirror in front of you, you would have noticed that your pupils got wider. You're going to stop salivating, but you're going to start perspiring more. You're going to have increase in respiration. You're going to be breathing heavier, right? Because you need to get that oxygen to your muscles to be able to grab that child. Your digestion is going to slow down, because who cares if you're able to digest that pizza that you just ate? There's a child that's potentially going to drown, right? And you're going to increase stress hormone levels, but also your immune system is going to be reduced. All of these, the reason why they do this is, okay, we don't need to digest. We don't need to worry about getting a cold right now. We need to put all of our energy and all of our resources into that emergency situation. So it's extremely important that we have an active sympathetic nervous system, but we don't want to stay in that state, right? We would actually much rather be in this parasympathetic state, which is the calming state. So if you go to grab that child, you save their life, the first thing you're probably going to do is take a deep breath, right? Have that moment, that relaxation where, you know, all of a sudden your respiration is going to decrease, your skin is going to dry, you're going to start salivating, your digestion is going to speed up, things like that. And you're going to have a more functioning immune system. Your adrenal glands are going to start working normally, things like that. So when that crisis passes, your parasympathetic division is going to calm us down. Okay. Now, in prolonged stressors, we're going to activate that the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which in turn is going to release cortisol. So the hypothalamus is going to say, hey, there's a stressor and it's a long time that we're going to have it activated. The anterior pituitary gland is going to release ACTH into the blood, which is discovered by the adrenal cortex, and that releases cortisol. And that is going to help mobilize our energies and allow us to function, especially in times of prolonged stressors in our life. So it's important that we have it, but if you have too much cortisol, that's when you're going to start having some negative consequences. So for example, initially, when you have a stressful experience, your immune system is going to be activated. You can actually increase the production of natural killer T cells and leukocytes and cytokines and things like that. But it can, as a result of doing that, which can help combat infections, it also can trigger the release of prostaglandins, which in turn can produce symptoms that are very similar to depression and anxiety. It ends up weakening the immune system in the long run, and it can harm the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is the area in your brain that's really responsible for memories, right? So these prolonged stressful times can actually negatively impact your brain health, can actually kill neurons in your hippocampus and damage them so that your memory is not going to be as functional. And it can in turn really significantly change your behaviors and who you are, right? Not only are you're cognitively kind of thinking in a more depressed state, you're going to be more prone to getting ill, and then your memory and your learning and memory system is going to be impacted as well. So again, we really don't want to have those stressors really start damaging our body. And we can see that with these persistent stressors and negative emotions, some people try to cope with just, starting to drink or smoke or not eating well. I know that initially when I have a really bad day, Ben and Jerry's become my new best friend, right? That's not the healthiest way of dealing with some of these things, but a lot of people do that, right? And it can lead to unhealthy behaviors, which in turn can lead to a lot of negative consequences. But even with that aside, we have the release of stress hormones. We know that it's going to suppress your immune system. You're going to be more likely to get sick, even if it's just a common cold. You're going to lead to the activation of your autonomic nervous system. That's where you get high blood pressure, stress, headaches, things like that. Tummy aches, you're going to have GI upset as a result of having your autonomic nervous system activated for too long. And it also is shown to increase the probability of having heart disease, which is a huge killer in our country, especially, but around the world. So we really do have to be careful of how much stress hormones we have circulating. So this was the other exercise that I had that I sent out to you guys. If you don't have this printed yet, it's okay. But if you have it handy, pull it out. If you don't have it, you can create your own. Basically what this is it's just a circle. It's called the Wheel of Life exercise. And these are just some headings that I've worked with other people with, and these seem to be a lot of the key, more important aspects of an individual's life. You can change the headings to whatever resonates most with you. So on here we have family and parenting, personal development, spiritual awareness, fun and enjoyment, relationships, both intimate relationships as well as social relationships, your health and aging in general, personal finances, and your career and profession. So again, those are just some categories that I use a lot of times with people, but you can use whatever resonates most for you. And then you have this ranking system 1 through 10 for each one of those wheels, or one of those chunks of the wheel. So what I want you to first do is kind of just go through this chart and don't overthink it. Just think to yourself really quickly, just jot it down. It shouldn't take you more than 30 seconds. For each one of these categories, rank how important each one of those is to you. Not whether or not you're doing it, but how important is it to you, right? Some people might think spiritual awareness is a number 10, but or other people, they don't think that that's very important. So this is a very individualized exercise. So how important are each one of these? And just circle them. And this is just an example one, what it would look like. What I want you to do is after you've circled them, draw lines to connect them to each other. Okay, so it's going to give you this shape on your wheel. I'll give you guys just a couple seconds to fill this out. Because then the next step would be to really look at your life and say, how satisfied are you in each one of these categories, right? So this particular person has family and parenting as a number 9. Now, how satisfied are you? Maybe put a square around it or a different color pen or something like that. So you can see the difference between how important it is to you and then how satisfied you are with that in your life currently. And then you do the same thing, right? You just connect the lines. And of course, you can do this anytime. I encourage people to do this periodically throughout the year to see, because people's values change, right? And maybe, earlier in the year, you really thought social relationships were extremely important. And now you're saying, oh, not so much, right? Or maybe other way around, that it is more important. And then how satisfied are you? And most of us are probably going to say not very, because we really haven't seen many people in a long time. So you can see how this changes and morphs as your year goes on, as your month goes on, however you want to do it. But I want you to really take these and interpret them for yourself. This is a way to identify, okay, this is an area in my life that I really should start focusing on, right? Because let's look at this individual had fun and enjoyment ranked as a 7, but really aren't satisfied with that. Okay, so then I would look at them and say, okay, I see this big gap here. What's the disconnect? Why aren't you satisfied? What are you doing for fun? What are you doing to, to care for yourself in this enjoyment type way? I would say you're right on par with your spiritual awareness, right? Personal development, maybe we can add a couple books here and there or whatever, right? And it's really up to each individual. Do you want to focus on the whole wheel at once and try to get them to overlap as much as possible? Or really just focus on one category, perfect that, or at least get it closer to where your satisfaction and, how important it is to you is more in line, okay? So this is just, again, an example that you can continue to do to see how you're growing and how you're changing and where your values are and how satisfied your life, how it fits into that mold. Because what you'll notice is, these are things that are causing me stress, right? This person has their career and profession, they rank it as being really important to them, but they're not feeling that satisfied with it, okay? So let's talk to somebody or talk to, a close person or talk to your boss or whatever. You can talk to me about it to kind of figure out, how can we make that a better fit for you? And then once you find that, different ways to manage the stress. Okay? I'm a huge advocate for individual counseling and psychotherapy. There are clinical results showing that it actually does work. And it can be very beneficial, but you have to find the right counselor or the right therapist for you, depending on, what background and what things that are really important for you, what areas that you want to focus on. There's different counselors and therapists out there for all of these different things, and you have to find the one that's going to work best for you. And then if you find that good balance, there's really a lot to be said with it. And I know a lot of insurance companies do cover counseling, at least some sessions of it. A lot of employers will pay for it. And now with telemedicine, it's a really, really, really great option and opportunity for people to seek help. And one thing that you're probably going to be working on with them is an activity known as stress appraisal. And I kind of alluded to this earlier in the talk. But let's say we have a stressor in our life. Hey, ever heard of COVID-19? That's a stressor, right? There's really nothing we can do about it. It is what it is, and that's the state of the world. We can wear as many masks as we want, but it's still around, and it's still a stressor in our life right now at this current moment. So now there's two ways in which we can handle it, right? And obviously it's going to be a stressor and it's going to look different. If you're a frontline worker, the way that it's affecting you is very different than how it is if you're a stay-at-home mom or a father, or you're trying to work full-time and you've got, these are all the things that I'm just like, hey, that's me. I'm trying to work full-time and I've got 2 kids. I got to teach them and they're sitting on my lap and I'm being pulled in so many different directions. And this basically looks like my kitchen sink, except my kitchen sink's a little messier, where that's just another added stress, right? And another stressor. So how do you view it, right? How are you going to appraise that? Are you going to look at it and say, F 2020, right? This is beyond me. There's nothing I can do. I hate my life. And this is beyond me. I can't cope. I can't handle it. Are you going to look at it as a threat? Or are you going to look at it as a challenge, right? And say, okay, I'm going to apply everything I know. I'm going to do the best I can. It's okay if my kitchen sink is a little messy, as long as we're healthy and happy. And, I'm going to talk to my employer and make sure that they understand that things might be late because I also have to teach first grade and all of these other things, right? So the first step is how we look at it. If we look at it as a threat, we're going to be very fearful. We're going to be anxious. But if we look at it as a challenge, that's where we're going to be focused, where we're going to be aroused, where we're going to be able to think more clearly, to be able to come up with different ways and mechanisms to make our lives at least functional, right? And to be in that survival mode, but in a good way, where we're able to figure out, and we're going to ask for help when we need it. And we're going to figure out different ways, like I become a huge lover of Instacart because now I don't have to go shopping out and I'm fortunate enough that I'm able to afford that. But so I figure out different ways to make it work for me and for my family because I'm looking at it as a challenge and not as a threat. Okay, so that's one of the key things. And this is something that doesn't just happen overnight. Changing the way that you think is a huge process and it's a big commitment to be able to make it work, right? But it really can be beneficial. So just know that everything that happens in our life, whether it's COVID or if it's whatever, anything, right? It's going to flow through this psychological filter. how we appraise an event, how we think about it, is the first step in how it's going to influence how much stress we actually experience, and then also how effectively we respond to it. And then in turn, how it's going to affect our health. All right. Another option that a lot of people turn to are medications such as SSRIs like Prozac, Zoloft, Celexa, Lexapro. There's so many different ones out there that all basically do the same thing. They're going to increase the neurotransmitter serotonin in one way or another, right? Benzodiazepines are also very effective at increasing another neurotransmitter known as GABA that's going to help calm you down. So if you have a lot of panic and generalized anxiety and things like that, it's a way to kind of slow your system down so that you can, quote unquote, cope with some of those stressors that are happening with you. I'm not going to say, like, I'm an avid proponent of medications. I'm not going to say, no, we don't need it. Everybody's different, and what helps one person versus another, you just have to figure out what's going to work best for you, right? But obviously they're not for everyone. There's lots of negative side effects and consequences to taking medications. And if you're on different medications or different health issues that you might have, you might not be able to take those, or maybe you want to have a more holistic approach to managing your stress. So various holistic approaches. One of the key things is social support, finding a network like Go Live or Go Live Spartan Experiences. And, we're all remote now. So Facebook groups, different community events, if you can get outside and go for a walk with other people, being safe about it. Having that social support is so big. I started tap dancing again, and it was so much fun. And we're doing these Zoom classes and seeing people that I hadn't seen in years. And I'm doing this, physical activity, which also I'm going to talk about is really good as well. But then it combines with that social support and that social network again, which is amazing. Breathing routines, meditation, again, Diamantos can definitely help steer you in the right direction for that. Even apps on your phone, like the Calm app, can be really great to help, if you don't have, somebody in your back pocket that you can just call and say, hey, help me, I'm a novice at this, how do I do it? There's a lot of really great tools and apps out there to help you with it. We know that if you're deep breathing, sometimes you can even just set an alarm on your phone. It's like every hour, just remind yourself to breathe. Just take that deep cleansing breath, right? And it will help you go from that sympathetic state into that parasympathetic state where you can start being calm. Meditation is absolutely wonderful and fantastic as well if you can do that, especially mindfulness meditation. As my son, I don't know if you can hear him cry. What's up, honey? Do you want to come sit here while I finish this? No? Okay. Another key one is aerobic exercise, okay? Honey, no, not right now, okay? Let me finish this. Aerobic exercise, this is actually looking at a 10-week study where they had women who were suffering from depression, and then they either had no treatment for the 10 weeks. They had, They had meditation relaxation techniques that they could do, or they were involved in an aerobic exercise program for the 10 weeks. And we can see that this relaxation treatment group did show a significant decline in their depression score, which is fantastic. But even more so than that would be this aerobic exercise. So it has the greatest decrease in depression. And to the fact that basically it does naturally what these prescription medications that we talked about before do chemically, right? It's going to actually help release more serotonin and dopamine and really counteract a lot of those negative consequences. It's certainly a lot easier to just pop a pill than it is to get involved in an aerobic exercise, lifestyle. Or some people, they might have heart condition and they can't do aerobic exercise, right? So I'm just trying to give a lot of different tools for individuals. All right, diet and nutrition. This one, a lot of time, like I'll talk to people about their diet and nutrition and they are so hesitant to make any kind of switch or change. And it's one of those things that if you're not fueling your body, your mind can't be fueled and function properly either. And it really stems, a lot of it stems from what you're putting in your body. So one key thing is drink water. Hopefully that's what Diamando's drinking. I just saw her take a swig of something, either that or it's vodka, so I don't know. But, yeah. So water, stay hydrated, right? You have to be able to maintain the proper water balance, but then also the proper balance of ions. I didn't go into the whole nitty gritty of how neurons fire, but you have to have a proper balance of salts in your diet: sodium, potassium, calcium. Those are all extremely important for your nervous system to be able to function properly. And on top of that, we have to create these neurotransmitters, right? I said there's over 100 of them. And what a lot of them come from are essential amino acids, which come from the proteins in our diet. So if you look at, I highlighted serotonin for you because I said that was a big one that we're going to be talking about. The precursor for serotonin is tryptophan. And you can get this naturally. No, you cannot go outside right now. Okay, 1 minute, honey. You can get this naturally from foods like beets, spinach, coconuts, eggs. Turkey is really high in it. It really just depends on if you're following a vegan lifestyle or not. There's a lot of different ways in which you can naturally get the precursors to serotonin and acetylcholine and dopamine. You can say hi. And all of these other ones, to be able to just naturally have those precursors so that your body can do what it's supposed to do, which is make these neurotransmitters and help your mood and also, everything else that you need to do. I love this chart because it's from 1971, and for glutamate, it says white bread. I don't think I've ever told somebody, oh, you should eat white bread, but it is on there. But so there are, and surprisingly, this chart hasn't been updated since 1971 with all of the changes in our eating guidelines and everything, which I find very interesting that it hasn't changed. I see that, honey. All right. Another key one. Honey, you've got to be, can you go back downstairs with your brother, please? Okay, then you have to be quiet. Go find your guy. Go find your toy, please. The toy's out of the car? Yeah. I'm sorry, Diamanto. All right. Probiotics. A lot of times people think of probiotics as just maintaining gut health and helping things flow and move in the right direction. But it also is really key for helping you control stress, particularly by enhancing the amount of tryptophan, which is the precursor to create more serotonin. So this chart I know is very overwhelming. There's a lot of abbreviations and things. I'm going to give you the very quick 1 minute rundown. So we have stress in our life, right? That is going to alter serotonin. Then because it's stress, you're going to trigger a stress response. The stress response is going to release cortisol, right? We talked about that. Now, cortisol, what it does is it causes inflammation, right? And it can actually increase different markers from liver enzymes like IFN and IL-6. And as a result, these inflammatory markers that are created and released can lead to immune suppression and then also lead to a reduction in tryptophan, which means less serotonin production, which means an even harder and stronger stress response where you're going to lead to even more serotonin deficits and more response to the stressor. So we can't really affect stress and we can't affect the stress response, but what we can do is try to prevent that inflammation and that inflammatory signal. So even if we have cortisol coming in and being released, if you add probiotics, changing your gut health can actually decrease the amount of inflammation and decrease the amount of negative consequences that you can have from some of those inflammatory markers, and at least mitigate some of the effects of that altered serotonin that you might be receiving from stress response. Now, that being said, not all probiotics are created equal. A lot of times, some of them are marketed and they don't really get absorbed, or they get degraded by the high acidity in your stomach, that they don't really absorb. They don't really do what they're supposed to do. So you really want to try to find a strain or several strains that actually colonize in your gut to have these longer lasting, more beneficial effects. If you'd like some information on that, I have a couple that I usually recommend to people to at least give a try. My favorite strain is Bacillus coagulans, is the bacteria strain that I love and use every day. All right. Another herb that's been around for thousands and thousands of years is ashwagandha. And I was trained, I said I have my PhD in neuroscience from Johns Hopkins. I never heard about any of these things. I was always learning about Okay, here's, tryptophan is a precursor, you get it from your foods and that's it, right? But now I'm starting to, as part of my business, really looking at some more of these holistic approaches. And these herbs have been, it's an ancient Ayurvedic herb that's been used, and it's very powerful adaptogen, and it can really help enhance your resilience to stress, reduce anxiety, fight depression, and also boost brain function in general. There's a lot of different ways that you can get ashwagandha. There's a lot of, there's a lot of health benefits, but again, speak to a physician or some kind of naturopathic physician or doctor to make sure that if you do have any kind of health concerns or other medications that you might be on, that it doesn't interact negatively with those. But it has been shown with clinical studies to help reduce cortisol levels, anxiety, and inflammation. So that's another herb to definitely look into. And then another one, phosphatidylserine. I know it's a fancy long word, but it's basically, it helps form the lipid bilayer of cells throughout your body. So it's found everywhere in all of your cells of your body. And it has a high propensity for, high affinity for neurons as well. So it can actually, if you take it as a supplement, it will actually target your neurons. And as a result, it can help support healthy cortisol levels as well. So it's a more natural way in which you can help support it, your brain functioning. It has been used as a potential treatment for ADHD. I know it's also, it definitely helps boost memory and cognitive performance. So a lot of physicians will give it to people who are suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's, things like that. And we can also know that it can help lower stress, or at least the consequences of stress. Again, if you would like any recommendations for different products that contain these, I have a few that I definitely love to recommend and let people try and see if it helps them. All right, and then another thing, reduce the toxins in your life. Maybe toxic people, but also other things like smoking, personal care. A lot of times people don't think about what they're putting on their skin can actually have a negative impact on their overall health. But our skin is our largest organ, and whatever we're putting on our skin can get absorbed into our bloodstream within 26 seconds. So you want to try to avoid potential toxins that are going to end up increasing inflammation, right? And we don't want that inflammation. So look out for things like parabens and phthalates, otherwise known as, it's hidden in the word fragrance. So if you ever see fragrance on a body lotion or something like that, be wary of it. Sodium lauryl sulfate, toluene, mineral oils, and other types of petroleum-based ingredients. You really want to try to avoid those because it's going to prevent your skin from doing what it's supposed to do, which is detoxify, but then also work as a barrier between you and the outside world as well. So if you can limit your exposure to some of these toxins, it can help reduce some inflammatory effects. And a lot of these things, people don't even think about it, but they're linked to cancer. They're known endocrine disruptors and things like that. And we're lathering our kids and our parents and ourselves in these lotions that we think are great, or makeup and things like that, but they're really actually doing more harm than good. So that is another thing that I can help work with people with as well. And then the most important thing that none of us get, nobody I know actually gets 8 hours of sleep at night or more, but we should be shooting for at least 8 hours of sleep. Every night. It's restorative. It's going to help with our memory. It's going to help with our stress reduction. The two free things that you can do today would be drink more water, get more sleep, and get outside, breathe some fresh air, and move your body. If you can start making a commitment to yourself to start doing those things, I bet you'll start seeing a lot of health benefits. And these were just, again, just a few different approaches and tools for your tool belt to help you. All right, so I want to thank you all for coming and checking this out. If you'd like to contact me, here's my information. You can always feel free to email me, or you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram. And then I also listed my website here. But again, I want to thank you all for coming and sharing the afternoon with me. Again, sorry for the interruptions with my dog and my youngest son. I knew it was going to happen. Again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. And you can also pop on now. I think we have time to ask some questions live if anybody would like to. Oh, it seems like there's a chat. Oh, thank you so much. You're very welcome, Keisha.
I'll just jump in for a quick second here. I love that your thank you and your brain are still there.
Yes. Oh, do you want me to take it down?
No, it's fine. Let everyone.
Oh, okay.
So I just want you all to know that going along with this, my company and my brand is all about helping to trick your brain into positive behavior. So I have a program where I work with people one-on-one. It's called Be Your Own Best Friend, and I use yoga and meditation and something called NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. If you're curious about any of that, you are welcome to contact me for a free 20-minute call to go over some of those things. And you all have my email address, and you now have Haley's contact information, but if you didn't write it down, just reach out to me via email and I'll make sure to put you in touch with her. I am not one of those people who's like only work with me and don't work with anyone else. It's really important to me that we all learn from each other, and everyone has something different to offer. And my network is huge, and all I care about is connecting people to one another so that everyone can be the best version of themselves that they can be. So I hope to stay in contact with all of you. Those of you who don't know me, I would love to get to know you. And thanks again, Haley, so much for leading this discussion. I learned a lot, and I just want to open it up for anyone if anyone has any questions.
No questions, but thank you, Haley. It was great.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much.
Anyone? Great. I saw a question about if we're willing to share the PowerPoint presentation for this. Haley, how do you feel about that?
I'm fine with that. Absolutely. Yeah, I can, I'll send it to you in PDF form, and then so it's a smaller file. And if anybody, or you can reach out to me personally, and it might be easier so that they have my point of contact as well.
What might be easier is I'm going to end up uploading the recording of this entire discussion to a YouTube account or possibly on my website. So once I've uploaded that, because there's a lot more information that you gave us verbally that's not in the PowerPoint presentation, I want people to be able to access that again so that they can really hear your wisdom, because it's to hear someone talk than to just read it. So I'll make this recording available for everyone. And Haley, I know that you're going to make it available for your network as well.
Yeah.
So people can see the PowerPoint again that way. Any other questions? What was the one before ashwagandha? Probiotics, right?
Yes, it was probiotics. And again, there's a lot of different marketing out there, and I just hate seeing people because some of them are more expensive than others. So basically, rule of thumb, if it's really cheap and you can find it at like CVS or Walgreens, it's probably not going to give you as much benefit as what you're looking for. And some of the strains are really geared more towards just GI health and you know, helping with constipation and diarrhea and things like that. But then there are some other ones that are more clinically shown to reduce inflammation. And I do have, if you want to shoot me an email, I can send you links to some of the products that I use and love and usually recommend to other people as well.
Great. Well, I'm going to let you pay attention to your son and the dog that's just randomly wandering outside by itself, and hoping that everything's okay.
She's contained, don't worry.
On you. Thank you all again for being here. Reach out to either myself or Haley with any questions you have, and I'm sure both of us would love to get to know you better and to work with you in the future. Have a great day, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you all. Bye.